Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tort Institute's first Facebook Live and our kickoff for Wellbeing Week in Law. The aim of Wellbeing Week in Law is to raise awareness around mental health of legal professionals. They want to encourage action and innovation to improve outcomes. The goal of the week is to start the conversation as an industry about health and well-being, and to come up with tools and strategies to improve well-being of not just attorneys, but those who support them, like legal paraprofessionals. Today, we're going to start talking about physical well-being, but throughout the week, we're going to talk about other areas of well-being, like spiritual well-being, career and intellectual well-being, social well-being, and on Friday, we're going to wrap it up with a talk about emotional well-being. I'm excited today to introduce Kelly Tenney. She is our Director of Operations at the Tort Institute, but more importantly, she is a community health educator and advocate.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Again, it's I always think about this career path that has brought me full circle, but I have been a health educator for almost 20 years. And I also have my master's in education with curriculum and instruction, which is what has led me here to the Tort Institute. So I couldn't be more excited to be able to be launching the content this week and to be able to have conversations with all of you out there around what is my core passion, which is health and wellness. And I think there probably couldn't be an industry that could benefit more from health and wellness and some support with overall well-being than all of you that work in this industry, because we know that being in the legal industry is not easy, to say the least. So we're certainly excited to be here to support you and to really give you the space and the time this week to focus on you and your own well-being, because as we'll talk about, obviously, everything that gets done in terms of efficiency and job performance, serving all of your clients really starts with your own well-being and your own self-care. So
let's start by actually defining physical well-being. What is physical well-being?
When we're talking about physical well-being, what we're really talking about is what traditionally is thought about when we think about the word health, or what well-being looks like. And that's with our physical component, or basically our bodies. So, physical well-being is interesting because it's often one of the most observable states when it comes to looking at your own health or seeing how well or healthy other people seem. It's those physical attributes. So that's where we're talking about things like energy. We're talking about things like weight, right? We're talking about things like, what people are eating. So nutrition, whether or not people work out and they exercise. But our physical well-being is really focusing on our physical body, the well-being of our body, as well as our body functioning.
Now that we have sort of a background on what physical well-being is, can you talk a little bit about why physical well-being, that body, like you said, why it's important for attorneys, legal paraprofessionals, all of those working in the law industry?
I think at the very core of well-being, things do start with our physical bodies. Obviously, when we're talking about the amount of focus and energy and concentration that our attorneys and support teams need to have, you can't really have that if you are tired, right? Or if you're not comfortable in your own body. I often think, and I feel like probably many of you out there have been in these shoes, but I think about even when you're in a state where you are carrying an extra few pounds, like around the holidays, right? For many of us, and just how uncomfortable in our own bodies we feel, right? And so really, I think it's really difficult to be at your best all around in terms of, again, energy, focus, concentration, when you're just not feeling comfortable in your own body. And so, with the amount of toll, I think, that happens in the legal workday, I think it's really crucial that our attorneys and paraprofessionals have that state of physical wellness where they are comfortable in their bodies. Their bodies are functioning properly. You don't need a headache to stop you in the middle of the day. You don't need that afternoon slump because you're lacking energy and things like that. And really, it's just recognizing that obviously everything is connected. And there's a big thing to be said too when we are not at our optimal physical health, that there are other things like our mental health and our emotions that are impacted as well. So because everything is so closely interconnected, it's really important to make sure that that physical piece is also being supported and taken care of.
Another thing I want to talk about, we know that exercise and physical activity is one component of physical well-being, but we know that nutrition is also equally important. In the coming weeks and months, people will be transitioning back to an office setting. We know that many times navigating the office setting, you're trying to get through the landmine of birthday celebrations and courtroom victories, vendors dropping by and bringing food. How do we make sure we're getting proper nutrition in an office setting?
I'm so glad that you asked that, because I know that, nutrition in itself is a challenge, especially for people who are potentially working long hours, maybe not getting regular breaks, maybe not seeing during busy times, not seeing a natural 9 to 5 workday, and things like that. And then you add in all of the environmental challenges that may come into play with nutrition. So I think the most important thing when it comes to nutrition is to plan, and really just have that plan of how your nutrition is going to go during the day. So for example, if I know tomorrow is your birthday, Jerice, in the office, and that usually means birthday cake or maybe going out to lunch, I'm going to plan maybe a little more carefully around what my breakfast is going to look like. I'm going to maybe plan on bringing some snacks that are maybe more healthful, knowing that I might be indulging as part of the celebration. And so, with planning, obviously also goes with that preparation. And one of the biggest things that I have always found challenging, and I think many of you out there will agree, is when, we often see meal planning. Meal planning and meal preparation is like the key to getting your nutrition down. And as someone who, has a job, who has children, has a family, I've always thought, how do people meal plan? Who has an entire weekend to sit there and just cook all day long to have healthful meals? But I don't think it necessarily has to be that difficult. I really don't think that planning necessarily always means that meal preparation and meal planning. So it's really just bringing your lunch, maybe limiting how much you are allowing yourself to eat out when it comes to lunchtime. If there are very often snacks, in the in the employee break room, then and they tend to be cookies, then making sure that you have that. And it might mean grabbing salad kits for your lunch. It might mean getting baby carrots or things that are already pre-cut. But I always think that having those things on hand is the number one way to be able to avoid that overindulging or the grabbing things on a whim that maybe are not as healthful. Because as many of you know, we tend to lose track when we get to that starving point, right? So if you can keep those healthy snacks and things at your desk so that you never get to that starving point where you're eating 8 cookies at lunchtime, then that's a really great way to kind of make sure that you stay in moderation. And it's always about moderation, right? It's not about skipping the birthday cake. It's really just about being able to have a small slice and walk away so that you're not overindulging in any of the temptations that may be part of those office celebrations.
Another component of nutrition and wellness is drinking water and staying hydrated. So what can law firms do to ensure that their staff has access to clean drinking water? Again, as we start to transition back into an office setting and being together, how important is drinking water, and what can firms do to really support their staff in making sure they get adequate water intake?
Water is so important. It's one of the 6 nutrients, right up there with vitamins and minerals, which a lot of people don't know. I think hydration and staying hydrated is a big challenge for people who are, buried in work, who may be able, may have their heads down, and, you look up, you don't even know what time it is and how long you've been working. And so hydration is one of the first things that tends to get away from us. And what people don't recognize is that a lot of the physical symptoms that are common throughout the workday, especially later in the afternoon, are directly related to being dehydrated. So we're talking about brain fog. We're talking about inability to focus. We're talking about headaches, right? A lot of those things that people tend to attribute to, I must be stressed or I must be tired, is actually attributed to not having enough water and being dehydrated. And there's a couple things that they say in terms of how to gauge hydration. And the biggest one is, if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. Right. And so for many of you that, that where you recognize like, I'm always really thirsty, after lunch or whatever it is, that's a big sign that you're probably not staying hydrated throughout the day. You never want to get to that point of feeling thirsty. So, when it comes to supporting the staff and things that firms can do, it could be as simple as having like a water cooler in the break room where people can access water. And if a water cooler isn't something that is available, it might be having bottled water, that's available. And also, Jerice, I know you and I both had held our bottles of water up, but I think it would be really fun for firms even to provide a firm water bottle. Maybe getting some water bottles that are have the logo on them, and maybe that's part of the onboarding when new staff come and they get a water bottle at the desk. But I think anything that firms can do to remind staff to stay hydrated, maybe it's a hydration break. Maybe they call the mid-morning breaks, hydration breaks. Maybe there's signs in the break room to drink water. But it really doesn't have to be anything that's elaborate. It definitely doesn't have to be anything that's costly, to be able just to remind people to drink water. And all of you, it could be as simple as setting an alarm
That's a great point.
To remind yourself to stay hydrated.
Now let's talk about the thing that we're all scarce on, and that is sleep. In mass tort, in the legal profession in general, but in mass tort in particular, we work long hours and sometimes weekends. And how critical is sleep to us, and how can we? What are some of the strategies that you can recommend to make sure that we're getting enough sleep so that we can recharge, come back the next day, and continue to do the important work that we're doing?
The challenging thing with sleep is that most of us can get through with minimal sleep. And so people think, well, I'm fine on 6 hours of sleep. And so they think that that's all that they need. But the tricky thing about sleep is at some point it catches up to us.
Right.
And it either catches up to us by lowering our immune system, which means we're more likely to get sick. It catches up to us in stress or anger management, meaning we may feel like we are performing well, but we're a little short fused, or we're feeling more stressful than normal. And so sleep is really important to be able to not just feel refreshed, but feel mentally, and emotionally supported as well. And so 7 hours, right? The whole I'll catch up on the weekend thing. doesn't count, right? It really should be 7 hours of sound sleep every night. And I think one of the biggest things that people can do is to recognize what they need in their nighttime routine. So, a lot of people talk about having a hard time falling asleep,
Right.
getting too wound up later on in the evening. I know with things like this at our fingertips, right? We have emails that are right there. It's really hard to cut off that work time, but I think it's important to really just shut it down, and if possible, even unplug a good hour or an hour and a half before your bedtime. And really just get your mind to be able to calm down. Some people like to read. A lot of people like to turn on the TV, but turning on the TV is actually counterproductive because it stimulates your mind. And so
Right.
it can kind of, get you wound back up again. So staying off social media, staying away from the television, are really good things to do before bedtime. Maybe meditating, listening to some music and things like that. But really, it's really hard to fall asleep quickly, and it's really hard to have a fitful night of sleep when we're going, and then we just try to hit the pillow. So it's really
Right.
just giving you that time to settle down. And again, planning. I know many of you probably have families, you probably have children. Around my house, bedtime is like circus number 2, right? So there's always like things that are happening. But if I know, for example, that I want to be in bed by 10 o'clock, and I know that I need that downtime, I need to plan to not have my kids go to bed at 9:30. Right? Because then 9:30 means we're struggling, and then I'm trying to get to bed. So it also is talking about planning your entire family's schedule. So if I want to go to bed at 9, if I want to go to bed at 10 and I want to give myself an hour to unwind, my kids should be in bed by 9 o'clock. Right. And maybe not asleep, but hopefully quiet enough so that I can have some downtime.
Right.
Or it might mean asking your significant other to take the reins. It might mean like, hey, can you do these things so that I can just unwind before bedtime? But I think a lot of people, just by unplugging, it will really be able to have a more fitful night's sleep. And again, sleep is like the biggest thing that we can give ourselves. And so really just not falling for that, I'm fine on 5.5 hours of sleep. It's no big deal, because eventually you're not. I worked with someone who, she was one of those like, I'm good, I'm just running on fumes, but I've been doing this for years. And then she fell ill, and she fell really ill, and her body had just become so run down from like years of doing that. And the hardest thing was, she was an owner of her business, was that her business, everything just came to a halt. And what we don't remember is, when we're sick, when we're run down, nobody is getting taken care of. You can't do your job, you can't go to work, you can't take care of your family. And, sleep is one of the biggest culprits of that, because like I mentioned earlier, it just sneaks up on you and you can't catch it up. You can't sleep 50 hours to make up for the last 6 months.
Or 6 years, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, these are all some great tips. You mentioned about unplugging, and I know for many mass tort professionals, during the day you're working. So it may be when you finally get to, have your head hit the pillow at nighttime, is maybe when you are doing the social media thing. Maybe you're catching up with friends or family, or some of those things that just during the day, when we're focused on the clients and processes and pushing cases along, we kind of rob ourselves of that rest time because we're trying to make up maybe other areas in our life where we've had to be away for the day because we're working. So it is very important. It's they talk a lot about social media addiction and things like that, but I think, trying to connect with people when you're really busy is something that we all suffer from. So I think that point about unplugging, giving yourself that time to wind down, is Great. I know that we didn't talk too much about exercise, but maybe we can do a little bit about, the importance of standing up and giving yourself a break, every couple of minutes, maybe checking emails while standing up. That's something I try to do now. That'll give me time to be standing. Things like smartwatches, anything that we could use to help us stay physically active. If you can touch on that briefly before we wrap.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a lot of things in the comments, and we're so glad that all of you are here. And for those of you that will be watching the replay, you of course can also continue to ask questions, and we'll be back to check and to answer anything that's coming in. But I'm seeing some conversation around water challenges, and water and step challenges are probably two of the most popular things that companies do to support the physical wellness of their employees. And it's fun. And if any of you are like me and are super competitive, like you're competitive people thrive in these things, right? Because I'm always like, I'm going to win. But it can be really motivating and just fun to have that accountability. And, one of the things with movement, and, I know we talk a lot about exercise, but I really would love to support people with recognizing that it doesn't always have to be about exercise. It's really just about moving.
Right.
So it doesn't mean going to the gym and running on a treadmill. It just means moving more, and moving more is going to have some of the same benefits that we see with drinking water, which is recirculating that blood, getting your focus back up, getting another burst of energy, helping you kind of, reset and concentrate. And so easy things with moving during the day is if you are setting an alarm to drink water, every time you drink water, get up and stretch. Do both of those things at the same time. If you're going to the restroom, taking a lap around the office, or maybe walking the long way to the restroom could be a great way just to get moving and things like that. I know often too on breaks, people kind of like, okay, I'm going to check my phone. I'm going to text my husband. I'm going to look at social media. But even walking downstairs and walking outside can be really great to rejuvenate that energy and focus. And so, it's very much like nutrition. It's plan. If you know you're in meetings all day, plan to maybe bring your lunch so that you can take a nice little walk in the middle of the day. Plan, maybe it's parking farther in the last parking space, right? So that you get a little bit more of your steps in. So really just any of that movement and that consistent, right? So as consistently as we want to hydrate, we as consistently want to get up and take a stretch, move around, stand up, and so forth. If you are going to email someone who's 4 offices down, walk down and have a conversation with them, right? Just to get moving. So it's easy to avoid moving with all of the technology that we have, but it doesn't take a lot, right? We're only talking about a couple minutes of moving and stretching. And, you can even stretch in your chair, but it's really important because that stagnant blood that happens when we sit too long really needs to get moving. And that's where we feel a lot of those slumps and things like that as well.
Right. We're really interested in any questions that anyone else out there in the viewing audience may have, any questions that you have about physical well-being, whether you're an attorney, a paraprofessional, anybody working in the industry. If you want some tips, we'll be happy to take some questions. Kelly, thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful. Thank you everyone who's been joining us and commenting in the chat. We're reading everything. We will be back tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. We'll be talking about spiritual health and connecting, the importance of connecting our work to our values, which we know is very, very important in mass tort. So we hope that you join us again tomorrow. We'll be here all week. And again, if you have any questions, you can always email us, info@masstortinstitute.com. If you just want general information, you can comment in the chat and we'll see everything, and we will make sure no question or concern goes unanswered. So again, thank everybody for joining us today.
Thank you. We're looking forward to seeing all of you tomorrow.
Take care, everybody.